All right, guys and girls, what's going on? Welcome to another edition of the Deck Talk Podcast. We have one heck of a show for you for tonight, and we have a great guest as well going to be joining the conversation. But first, we have to talk about the sponsor for tonight's episode, which tonight's sponsor is actually going to tie in real well with what we're going to be talking about in tonight's show. Tonight's episode is sponsored by Cornfield Fishing Gear, offering electronic mounting brackets you can trust, rock solid, engineering, safe and secure, giving you a peace of mind, knowing you can focus more on fishing and less about the security of your investment. Whether you're running single or dual units from the console to the bow, they have brackets that will suit your fishing style, fully adjustable mounts, made, produced, and manufactured right here in the USA. For more information on Cornfield Fishing Gear, contact us on our Deck Talk Podcast website at www.decktalkpodcast.com. Again, that is decktalkpodcast.com. Guys, we have one heck of a guest going to be joining the conversation tonight. A good buddy of ours, Mr. Caleb Bell, the owner of BassQuest Fishing Charters. Now, Caleb is one heck of a knowledgeable angler when it comes to your electronics, graphing, lake mapping, and we're gonna get into this tonight. And Caleb is gonna kind of give us a lot of tips and helpful hints that hopefully, leaving this show tonight, you will become a better angler and being able to use your electronics to your advantage. So anyway, without further ado, let's get right into the show. I hope you enjoy it with our guest tonight, Mr. Caleb Bell.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Deck Talk Podcast. And I just want to say, I've got many hats that I have at the house and that I wear. And I wore this hat today just for one reason, because we got Caleb with BassQuest Fishing Charters. And if you could say, this says Bass University. And I'm wearing this hat because old BassQuest is fixing to take us to school. So we're going to get rocking and rolling. And but Caleb, man, thanks for coming on, brother.
What's going on, Caleb, man? How you doing, brother?
Pretty good. Just got off the water.
That's awesome. Me too, man. Me too. How was your day? You doing any good?
It was pretty tough until this afternoon. Got on a good frog bite for a minute, and then went and fished some marinas just to kill some time. Caught a few good fish there. And finished off fishing for schoolers, and that's where we really cracked them.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Good deal, man.
So, Chickamauga, well, I mean, the Tennessee River has been pretty interesting here the past, month or so, ever since we had the hurricanes that came through North Carolina. And you really, because you're out there every day, and you get to see everything. And me and you talked the other day, and you're like, man, you asked me if I was doing any good. And yeah. I was like, nah. I was like, I was kind of hesitant to go out, especially that I was going to go out the day that me and you talked, and you're like, hold off until at least 4:00. Yeah. But can you talk a little bit about, because everybody's not fishing the main channel right now. And can you talk a little bit of why they're not fishing the main channel and what they're doing?
The deal we got going on right now is we're getting all this water from Douglas Lake, which is all water from North Carolina. This is, impacted by the hurricane where we had the dam failures up there in North Carolina. Well, that trickles through Douglas, eventually gets in the Tennessee River. And so now, like Watts Bar, I think Fort Loudon, Chickamauga, down into Gunnersville is just chocolate soup. And it was so strange because we had 7 inches of rain from that same hurricane here. And this has been, I haven't put a date on it or anything, but it's got to be close to a month now, right? The hurricane.
Yeah, it was the 24th of September. It was right before my birthday.
A little over a month.
Yeah.
And we got our 7 inches of rain, which is significant rainfall for us. That typically will dirty up our lake pretty bad, but since it had been so long since we had rain, a lot of that was soaked up, and so we had a really short dirty water period on Chick. And then I think it was about 9 days later it started to get cloudy.
Yeah.
And I was like, nobody knew what was going on, really. It didn't register right away, I don't think, to most people. And then it got a little more cloudy. And then there was like a mud line on the main lake, and it was really good because the current was running. So then we figured out, okay, this is water that's coming in. We're getting this water, this dirty water. And as long as the current was running, it was all right. And then all of a sudden, it started to inundate everything. Like it pushed into the creeks, pushed on the flats, and it got down to like 4 inches of visibility. And it got to this weird, milky kind of red clay, almost like Mississippi type water. And those fish did not like that. They jumped ship big time right then. And then the current dropped out, and that caused when you have a big influx of current on these rivers, whenever you stop that, you stop the spillways and stuff, what happens, you get a backflow. So it backflowed into a lot of the creeks. And so the first thirds of the creeks and like all the pockets had that nasty water in it, and it got really, really tough for a few days. And then it started to kind of dissipate a little bit on the main parts of the backwaters and the bigger creeks. And now, as of today, finally, I can't do the math in my head, but we're talking like 20-something days later, it's actually starting to clean up a little bit on some of the main lake flats. You can just see it's still dirty. Don't get me wrong. It's like a foot to a foot and a half visibility, but you can tell a difference right there. And there's some fish that are actually starting to set back up in those areas right now. So it's finally happening, but we had to get really creative and kind of get ahead of the pattern. And it was really weird. These fish jumped into these bigger creeks and they went to a straight, like, late wintertime pattern where they're roaming on bait. They're on do-nothing flats. They're, like, at the very backs of pockets and creeks where they should have been, they could just now be getting to some of these places, what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And thankfully, they kind of jumped ship and the bait jumped ship. And so we were kind of able to get on that bite, but it's not anywhere near as good as it would be a few weeks from now because of the weather is so hot. It's just they just don't bite the same.
Yeah.
There's not that urgency to feed up that you get.
No. Well, see, and we had talked about it the other day, and we were talking about how, like, nobody's on the main river channel. They're all in the back of the creeks.
Yeah.
And I was telling you that the Hiwassee was looking, if you don't know, the Hiwassee always has like a greenish brown color anyways. It's not a clean water.
It's the clean water now.
Yeah, it is the clean water. And it's finally back from a little bit past the 58 bridge all the way up to Charleston.
Yeah.
It has finally got back to what would be considered normal watercolor to them. And so the fishing is still, they're still a little slow on it. And it might be because, like what you're talking about, they're on that wintertime bite. And because usually right now I'm trying to throw a crankbait, a chatterbait, or a underspin or something like that to kind of resemble of having some kind of bait fish around. And they really was not. Today I went and fished a little pond, and that was the best chatterbait bite that I've had in a while.
Yeah. There's been some caught on a chatterbait the last few days. But it's coming back around.
Has what has it done to the grass? Because we got, when people don't realize, like, when during the summertime we have a summer pool, and then wintertime we have a winter pool. Yeah. It went to where at one point we were like 5.5, 6 feet below summer pool, and then when all this water came in, did it get above summer pool?
No. It actually didn't raise a whole lot. We were able to really control the lake level. Now it did, we were we were getting close to 2.5 feet low, and it probably got back up to about a foot low, and then it fell quickly back to where it was. So we were able to control the flow of water really well. That wasn't a problem. The problem was just the influx of all the sediment and stuff that we're getting
Right.
from up above us. So we didn't have any issues with major flash flooding again because we were so dry.
Yeah.
It wasn't like our creeks were running and then we got a bunch of water and like the ground was saturated and the water ran off. It was like our ground and our trees and our creeks were all thirsty.
They needed it. They needed it.
Yeah, exactly. They needed every drop of that. So that didn't really cause us an issue. But the thing is, anytime you have an event like this, first of all, they sprayed like crazy this year on some of the main lake flat, more than I've ever seen. We had flotillas of boats, up to 7 boats out there spraying at a time. And it's just a disaster because what's happening is TVA is subcontracting the spraying out now. And so what's the incentive, right? If you're a subcontractor, you're getting paid to spray a certain amount of gallons of material into the water. Well, you don't want to, if there's not as much grass this year. Okay. So I still have to spray this amount. Otherwise next year they're going to cut me and I'm not going to get as much. Right. And so what happens is you get this cycle, and it happened in Florida. I know Norman, you know that. You get this vicious cycle where it's like I'm trying to spray all my chemical and then maybe a little more besides so I can get a little more money next year. But because I've sprayed so much chemical, there's less vegetation to go around. And so pretty soon you end up really getting way ahead of the curve instead of actually managing the spraying properly. So that's one thing that happened. But thankfully, we didn't drop pellets or anything that I could see. So a lot of that stuff grew back or started to grow back. Now, the problem you get when you get a major influx of water in a normal situation, you get dirty water and you get a lot of current. So the sediment will get onto the aquatic vegetation, and then the dirty water in combination with that won't let the plants photosynthesize as well, basically, right? You're not getting as good of a light penetration, so you're not growing as fast. That's one thing that happens. The other thing that happens on the Tennessee River on Main Lake is you get a ton of current ripping through there, and that will uproot grass as the grass weakens due to, again, the dirtier water, and then you have the current on top of that. You start losing a ton of grass, and there was massive wads of grass floating down river that whole time that was going on when they were ripping current through here. So they stopped current, and I actually went and checked a lot of stuff that had grass, Main Lake still, regardless of all the spraying that happened. And a lot of it's gone, but there's quite a bit that's still there in some areas. You just kind of got to really know what to look for. It's some isolated stuff, and it's something that you don't necessarily find unless you've been on the water on this lake a lot and you know right where the current breaks are on the flats that basically protected the grass from getting blown out. So that's one thing that's going on is we're just going back through and trying to find. Now we have some good grass in some pockets. We've got some good grass in creeks and stuff like that. There's good mat fishing to be had. The issue is that there's not nearly as much as normal. So when you have a lot less grass, there's a lot less grass to go around, right? So your frog bite gets blown out pretty quickly because everyone finds what few little mats that there are, and they just get beaten to death. And so it makes it tougher overall for anybody that's wanting to get out there and frog fish. You just don't have as many options out there. Everybody gets excited about it. Everybody does it, and so it's been okay. It's been decent. If we had cooler weather, it'd be pretty good right now. A lot of the mats that I found are kind of shaping up. I actually had a couple really big fish blow up in a mat a few days ago on an artificial trip with a guy. He lost one that was probably 6 or 7 that blew up on a frog, and I had one that was well over 8 blow up on a frog next to the boat 3 times and missed it all 3 times, unfortunately. So,
oh man,
the right fish are in there. You just gotta get lucky and get one to go in this warmer weather. And other than that, it's just an afternoon schooling bite. That's typical for fall fishing. You get a really good bite in the afternoon. There's a pretty short window in the mornings, unless you get lucky and there's some cloud cover or a front moving in or something like that.
Right.
Now, what are like for artificial baits and stuff right now? What are you throwing right now?
So my biggest producer lately has been like the Hog Farmer BFL Micro or the Tactical Bass and Micro rig. Just basically compact Alabama rigs. And this is something that's always good in the fall and the winter. These fish have seen a lot of A rigs and stuff like that. And so downsizing and going to smaller baits is extremely effective on getting those fish to go. So I wish I had one in here I could show you, but I go to Galen over there. He gives me the blades, the live blades. So on one side it looks just like a fish, kind of a white dad with a fish imprinted, and then when it flips, it's silver, and so that adds depth to the school. You got a flash, and then you got white, flash, white,
Right.
flash, white. You get more bodies basically in the school that way. And then I'm going 2.8s and then running 3.3s on the bottom. Every once in a while, I'm throwing, yeah.
This, I forgot which. This is from Driftwood.
Driftwood. Okay, I thought that was one of Kevin Drake's rigs from Fishtails. It looks just like it.
No, this is Driftwood.
Yeah.
And but it's the same thing. Was what your does yours have 5 or 3 on it?
You mean wires?
Yes.
Yeah. So the BFL Micro is a 5-wire, and the Tactical Bassin is a 6-wire.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they do 3 teasers and then 3 baits on theirs. And you get a little extra blade action there. I really like that tactical rig, but it's a little bit more expensive, right? So that Micro is probably the most affordable for hog farmer as far as those kind of rigs. But a small rig, smaller baits, and go lighter with the heads. A lot of people mess up and they go heavy with the heads. Year round, I don't care how deep the water is or what's going on, you can get away with 1/8 ounce heads. Like if it's really deep and I'm trying to get it down to fish that are swimming really fast, and it's a live scope bite, then you might run 3/16 on both sides and an 1/8 in the middle. But what'll happen if you run too heavy a weight on there, your rig will tilt and it won't run flat. And so if you have to, quick tip here, if you have to fish a rig deep for whatever reason, if you're in a Highland Reservoir situation, say the fish are suspended in 40 over 80, and you have to get your rig down while they're swimming at least 20 foot above their head or 15 foot above their head. In that situation, you have to have something that'll get down fast. What you can do is take yourself a bullet weight and peg it in front of that. And you just experiment with your weight until you can get that rig to level out with your swim baits. So you can get it down there faster, but it's not doing this, coming through the water.
Now, what rod are you going to want to throw the A rig with?
With that small rig like that, I throw it a lot on like a 7.3 medium heavy.
Right.
Lightweight, maybe 15-pound fluorocarbon, 18-pound fluorocarbon. It's just something. It's so light, especially with 1/8 ounce heads. I mean, it's basically. I mean, it's the equivalent of throwing like a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait around.
Okay.
So you don't need a whole lot for it. Sometimes I'll run a 7.6, but just for comfort level, I've noticed like 7.3. It's got a good action. I've been throwing that a lot, and I just really like that. I've been throwing it on a Joe Burns custom rod that he's built for me years ago. I actually won it in a tournament, and it's one of my favorite rods. Excellent chatterbait rod, awesome spinnerbait rod, trap rod, and then it's really good for that small rig. And then, of course, I throw a lot of Dobbins rods, so like a 744 is an excellent rod.
I got it.
Or 734. Like a 4-power is great. You can get away with a 5-power is no big deal. I mean,
right.
But I like something parabolic because I like to, when they eat that thing, I want them, first of all, to get it really good. And when you load into that thing, and it's like a slow load. And so that, I think it helps you get doubles and triples on there.
Right.
Now, we went out. What was it? I guess it was about a month and a half ago, wasn't it, Caleb, that we went out?
Yeah, it's before the hurricane.
Yeah, so it might have been 2 months ago. Yeah. And which we need to get back out there. But
I know we need to do a rod bait trip with the little Snoopy poles.
I've got them ready.
We did that.
And so, but speaking of the Snoopy poles, you had a little bit of an upgrade when we were out there. And you were fishing with 2 or 4 pound test line?
Oh yeah, I do that. I actually I went and fished on Parksville, and I fished with that rod a lot up there. I caught a bunch of spots on it. And I'd fish artificial all the time. I use a downsized, like a minnow, jighead minnow. but I'll go with like a Gulp minnow, a 3-inch Gulp minnow, or a Zoom tiny fluke, and then maybe a 16th or heavy. I'll go like an 1/8 ounce sickle hook crappie jig head, and I'll throw that thing out there, and I'll just the same thing everybody's doing with the 4, 5, 6-inch minnow. But I'm doing it with that little downsized deal with 4 or 2 pound test, and you will smash the fish with that. Like, you catch everything, obviously, but like it's nothing to catch a 5 pounder doing that.
Yeah,
it's amazing how many big fish will take a shot.
Well, you was telling me you was wanting to catch a 7 on that, an 8 on that little rod.
Yeah, I've already caught several over 7. My biggest on that is 7 pounds 14 ounces for a bass, and then I've got I get them switched up. It's either a 23 pound drum or a 23 pound blue cat, and the other one was like 18 pounds. So they were flop.
Right. Either way. So, but you right after we had went out, you went out with a good buddy of ours, Alex.
Yeah.
Alex with Alex Rudd Fishing, and you actually caught a tank on that rod.
Oh yeah, it was like a 7. Yeah.
And so.
It was a blast, man. We caught a bunch of fish. I haven't posted video of that yet, but we caught a bunch of fish out there. And then we went to the river, and we realized really fast, like, you couldn't reel a fish against the current with the 4 pound. Like, it just, you just sit there. We were sitting there at the wing wall, and I'm like, yeah, this ain't going to work. It's like a 30-minute fight. The poor fish is freaking half dead by the time you get it
in. So, but yeah, every time I go out, man, I always have a blast, and I enjoy chit chatting with you. Even if we're on the phone or even at a shop somewhere talking.
Oh yeah.
But let's kind of get down to some of this schooling that you're going to do today.
Yeah.
And because I think again, in which I've told you many times, this. Guys, with what Caleb is about to talk about, he has this on his YouTube channel at BassQuest on YouTube. And he'll go on his videos on YouTube. He breaks it down a whole lot. We don't have the time really for him to sit down and kind of go full details in it. So he's going to give Cliff Note versions of what the transition of what the fish are doing from the fall going into the winter time. But if you want the full details, you need to go check his YouTube channel out. Again, it's BassQuest on YouTube, and it's BassQuest on everything, isn't it? Or BassQuest Fishing Charters.
Either BassQuest or BassQuest Fishing Charters on everything. Pretty much everything's BassQuest Fishing Charters now. Except for YouTube, it's still just BassQuest.
And we'll put the link to the channel too in the description of this episode as well.
And the YouTube channel. The last time I was out on the boat, I was told that the YouTube channel might change to the Puerto Rican Mexican or something like that.
Yeah, Puerto Rican redneck.
Puerto Rican redneck.
Do that. I think that's a lot more accurate.
Yeah, the Puerto Rican redneck. So you heard it first here.
Exactly.
But Kayla, I'm going to pull this up and let you get to talking.
We're talking fall transition. Now, this is Tennessee River situation here. Now, this is going to apply to a lot of lowland reservoirs. Lowland reservoir, Tactical Bass has done a bunch of videos on this, and I think they describe it best. A lowland reservoir typically has a wider dam on the bottom of it. So instead of it being flooded mountain ranges, which is what we consider a highland reservoir, right? Highland mountain ranges. So you have these very steep embankments and a lot of just tons of finger points and stuff like that. And a lot of times those are very deep. And because they're flooded in canyons, you typically have a narrow dam, maybe a couple hundred yards across, but very deep. It might be a 300-foot dam. Whereas Chickamauga, it's very, very wide across the dam over here. But you can see it's just it's not a super deep dam. Like the other side of it, I think it comes out at like 60 feet or something like that.
Yeah.
So talking about lowland reservoirs specifically. Now, you might have a natural lake where you fish. I'm going to go over this basically in a river fishery like this. So Chickamauga, Watts Bar, Loudon, Nickajack. These are all lakes along the Tennessee River chain. And what happens is you have current that's always pushed through these lakes. Now, it might just be a little bit of current sometimes. It might be a lot of current. But what that causes is you don't get a turnover. So a lot of natural lakes or a lot of lakes that don't have a lot of current running through them or deeper lakes, they tend to get a thermocline, which is basically where you've got water with low oxygen towards the bottom of the lake, and there's a separation due to the temperature and the fact that it is not turning over. So the water is not moving enough due to current. It's not moving enough due to wind flow. And so because it's not turning over, you actually get what's called a fall turnover. So whenever that colder, deep water with low oxygen, and then the warmer water with oxygen at the top, whenever those temperatures, as the temperature, outside changes the water temperature up top, eventually they equalize. And then as they equalize, they flip. And so you have this really weird time on a lot of these reservoirs where it's in transition, it's all bubbly and like it's muddy and it's weird. And typically it's really hard to get bit during that transition period. And then in the summertime, as you get into the fall, you also have to learn how to fish over top of the thermocline. So in our situation, Chickamauga and all the Tennessee River, we don't have to worry about that. We might have a slight amount of turnover in some of the bigger creeks, but it's usually not enough to really warrant any kind of response. So what these fish do during the summertime, everyone knows about ledge fishing. You got these main lake islands, such as this right here. You've got ledges on creek mouths. And a ledge is basically, you see these tight contour lines. It's almost black because these contour lines are so tight right here. This is the original river channel. Before the lake was flooded, and it had a dam on it, this would have been what the river looked like originally. There would have been an actual island right here. And all this would have been farmland that was flooded, and then you had little creeks that ran through there. So once this was flooded, when we talk about ledge fishing, we are talking about fishing around this original river channel. And that can also apply to creeks. So, you can ledge fish in a creek like Chester Frost off of these humps and stuff like that. So that applies to that as well. But as you get into this transition period, as the water temperatures begin to fall, and the bait fish, what will happen is they start to migrate around. There's actually a little bit of a shad spawn going on. A lot of people don't realize that as well. You get, when the water temps get in the 70s, a lot of times these shad will go through the process of spawning again, especially the younger ones. So you got a lot of smaller shad that are up spawning. They're actually spawning around some mats right now, and there's fish blowing up in these shad mats because of that. So when these shad are spawning, and as they move shallower, at least a portion of the shad do that. A lot of the fish will actually jump ship from these main lake river ledges. And as the fall progresses, as we get cooler and cooler, and this is just something everybody, you're talking, this is straight out of Bassmaster magazine. These fish they'll jump onto the flats, and then they'll end up way in the back of creeks or pockets schooling on bait, right? That's what we've all heard. In reality, there is a portion of fish that migrate in the lake, and then there's a portion of fish that stay resident. So let's say if I had to just guess off the top of my head, in Chickamauga Lake right now, there's probably about 30% of fish that stay in the creeks at all times, right? They stay on the flats at all times. They are shallow water fish, period, right?
Yep.
And then there's about 30% of fish that always live deep. They always live around the edges, the ledges, and stuff like that. Okay? And then there's about 40% of fish that actually do this migration deal that we've all heard about. And so the reason why that's important is you're just playing your odds, right? Like when times get tough, or if you're really after, chasing fish, you want to catch a lot of fish, you want to get around the largest amount of biomass in the lake, right? You want to get around the most fish possible so that you have a better chance of fooling, a significant amount of fish, so you can catch a lot of fish that day. So right now, a lot of these fish, typically what they would be doing is they're going to hit secondary areas. They're going to hit, this is a secondary channel right here. I don't know if you can see this, but it's popping off the main lake. We got this channel. It's deep, 27 foot right here. And the side of it is mid-depth. This is what I call the mid-depth range, 15 foot or so. Now, that's all relative. In a highland reservoir, mid-depth might be 60 feet, right?
Yeah.
So it's all relative. But these fish, a lot of them make the transition and they'll stop at various stopping points, little secondary points along the secondary channel, and eventually they'll make their way here. Now, some of it happens at different rates in different parts of the lake. Like I've noticed that some areas will be way ahead. There's fish already in the backs of some of these places. And then some of them, it's like they're just now getting there. So you have to really run around on your lake and don't ever settle for anything. Like if you find some fish on a major creek, let's just zoom out here. Let's go up to a good looking creek here. We're going to Saudi, right? Say you run into Saudi and you start seeing a lot of fish on these road beds, on these secondary points. Those are fish that are moving in, right?
Right.
Okay, but they're a little bit harder to catch, and maybe there's only 10 here, 15 there, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so then you run to the back. You're like, man, it'd be a lot easier if they were in this shallower water back here. But you go back there, and it's a ghost town. Just because it's that way in one creek has no bearing on these other major creeks. You might go right up here to Possum Creek, and you might run to the back over here, and it might be just loaded, just slap loaded with them in the back. And there's no fish on the secondary stuff. So never take anything for granted. You know, it's like you need to run and gun, and you need to be covering water. That's kind of the name of the game, especially early fall, is junk fishing. You're trying stuff shallow. You're trying top water. You're trying main lake grass lines out here. You're constantly keeping your eyes on a swivel because you're looking for schooling fish. So this gets more stable as we get colder. And we're in that period right now where it really starts to we get into what I consider to be like a really good fall bite. The only thing that we're lacking right now, we've got the length of days, right? The days are getting shorter. We get that weird, and you can always tell, kind of my rule of thumb is, it's like when it gets to 10 o'clock in the morning, and then you're like, before 10, you couldn't bed fish, right? It's that weird kind of twilight when you start getting into the winter time. I disagree with that because I think that you should leave fish if they're not the right size, or if they're not the right amount, or if they're not active.
Yeah.
It's time to leave those fish. Or say you do have that figured out. That's great. Okay. Now expound on that.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid. I guess the fish fearless would be the way I would describe that. It's just, don't be afraid that if I leave these fish, man, I might not catch any more fish today. At the end of the day, who cares? What you're doing right now is you're laying the groundwork to really, really capitalize when this starts to happen, right? When it gets good, you want to know all the places on the lake that the right fish, and for me, that's giant fish, right? Like I'm always chasing above average size fish. So I'm going to leave 4-pounders to go try to catch 8-pounders any day of the week.
Oh yeah.
So that's a key mentality to have. Is like, okay, boom. Okay, I found these fish. This is great. Does it have double-digit potential? Maybe, maybe not. Right? Unless I see any evidence of that, unless I start catching older year class fish like 8+ pounders, I probably am going to move on. I'm going to keep dialing different things in until I find the right size fish.
Right.
But that's what these fish. So I guess one of the biggest misnomers is don't just believe that all fish make this migration. Okay, that's a huge thing. There's going to be fish like there's deeper areas that I can still go to and catch fish, especially if I know the right fish are there. Because that's the next thing these fish are going to do, as far as all our theories, right? They work their way back out and they get in these ditch mouths and they hang out and stuff all winter long, right? That's the next theory. What if I told you that those big fish might be hanging out at that ditch mouth right now, right?
Yeah.
While everybody else is back here catching 4-pounders, big fish almost always make the move first. And so that's why you got to push the envelope, because she might have already come and gone from here. She might be out here.
Right.
She might be out here. And now that we have live scope technology, you can tell. Like you can throw out there, especially with I throw an Alabama rig a lot too to gauge size of fish very quickly, instantly. So out there, they're not bigger than my Alabama rig. Probably not worth fishing for.
Right.
They're going to be fun to catch. Like if I'm fun fishing, artificial fishing and stuff like that. boom. I love to catch fish. Don't get me wrong. But for my clients and for what they want to do, a lot of times I'll be like, okay, these are not the right size fish. I don't see any of them around. Well, maybe I'll cruise out here. Maybe there's only 10 or 12 of them out here. Well, that's great, but maybe they're all over 6.
Right.
So it's like I might not get as many bites, but I might get the bite I want. The same thing happens ledge fishing in the summertime. Like I was fortunate this year. I found fish out here, and Bank Shaw actually won a major tournament. He won the Toyota Series. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but it was the middle
early summer, wasn't it?
It was early May.
Yeah.
And I've been checking these fish on all the ledges and stuff like that. And I was idling out through there, and it's like you'd see 10. And I know a lot of other guys were idling and stuff. And I was like, I'm not going to stop for 10. And they weren't like, it wasn't like 10 of the right ones, you know. And so I was like, this is just not the deal. Well, I think it was, I had a trip, and it was Friday. So it was a Thursday, Friday, Saturday tournament. And I went out, and I idled the ledge, and I saw some big marks up high. And I was like, I just want to stop. I got to look at it with the live scope just to see. And I turn in there, and I see about 30 fish over 6 pounds chasing like 3 gizzard shad on the live scope. I'm like, holy crap. So I go out there. Long story short, we sit out there. It was a live bait trip. And we ended up on one spot. We pulled out, and we had like 43 pounds in 30 minutes. Yeah, I was like, it's game on. So I call my buddy. I'm like, dude, there's not many out, but they're out. I was like, if someone in this tournament finds these fish, they're going to win 100%. And then I looked at the weigh-in that afternoon, and Banks he had like a big bag, you know, first day one, it was like 22 pounds. Good. Well, Friday, he has like almost 29 pounds. I was like, I texted my buddy, I was like, Banks found him.
Yeah.
And then the last day, he had 34 pounds, you know, out there fishing for the community holes that normally would have 200 fish, 300 fish, 100 fish. They all only had a handful out there, but there was not a fish out there under like 4.5, 5 pounds.
Right.
They were like from there all the way to double-digit class. And so that is an example of where being ahead pays major dividends because those fish had not been presented a bait in those areas yet at all. And so it's like I could go out there and throw a spook and have 25 pounds. Right. Come out of 15 foot of water, eat a spook. So that just goes to show you right there. And I don't care if it's a highland reservoir. I don't care if you're fishing a natural lake. Ben, my buddy Ben up in Michigan, he had a really crazy experience. And this is something that I just recently learned from a Zona show, actually. So in the fall, the big smallmouth up north will actually do a mock spawn in the fall. And they'll run up really shallow, and it's like super cold outside, but the temperatures, even though it's really cold outside, like the temperatures there kind of get into the spawning range just for a minute. Yeah. And there'll be literally hundreds of smallmouth that just disappear from where you've been catching them and flood the bank, and they're up in sight fishing range again. And they went out, I think they were on the bay, if you told me right, but they had like 28 pounds.
Yeah.
Fish the other day, and they caught just an unbelievable amount of them. But that's stuff that you have to pay attention to, like this deal with the shad spawn that's going on right now. There's threadfin that are spawning. I haven't seen anything with gizzard shad, but be ahead of the game. And this is a great time to start scouting places that fish are going to be all winter long, right? So,
well, I mean, what you were just talking about, like with Shaw and what you had seen right before he had that tournament, and it definitely hits what you're talking about. You want to be ahead of the game on that. Because if those fish have seen baits before, then they're probably going to have lockjaw out there instead of being able to.
Much harder to catch. You know? Right, that's the thing. If you're the guy that is on the front side of a pattern, even though you're fishing, you know, this is Chickamauga Lake, you're still fishing for highly pressured fish. Okay, but the bonus is that you're fishing for that highly pressured fish in a place that she hasn't been yet.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a catalyst. I always say when you're hunting trophy fish, with any kind of bait, doesn't matter what it is, you need something to throw the fish off its game. Those fish are very in tune with their environment, and they're very in tune with what's going on. Fish is going to feel your boat. It's going to feel a bait in the water. It's going to feel and understand what's going on in a much broader range than a smaller fish.
Right.
Now, vision-wise, as they get older, they don't have as good a vision. But I don't think a bass, I think they're more in tune to what they feel than they are, especially a largemouth. Like a spotted bass and a smallmouth bass, they're a lot more visual. Smallmouth probably have more of an affinity to scent than any other bass. I can't tell you how many big smallmouth I've caught on cut bait, catfishing. They really go for smell, and that's why the max scent works so good on smallmouth bass.
Right.
But largemouth, it's to me their biggest sense that they have is definitely that lateral line. It's what they feel in the water and how they interpret what's going on. And the bigger they are, the better they are at doing that. And so if you can take that fish, whether it's a high water event, maybe it's dirty water, it's a high water event, it's got a lot of current, so she's moved, she's positioned from where she normally lives, maybe it's an offshore brush pile, it's a small shell bed, she's repositioned to this current break with all these other fish. Okay, that is an opportunity to catch that fish, because you're going to present a bait that she might have seen 100,000 times, but you're going to present it in a new place where she's not used to everything that's going on in her environment. So that makes a huge difference at night when you take away sight from a fish. That's why in the summertime, your best bet to catch a double-digit fish or an 8-pound fish is always going to be at night. And that goes for a lot of the fall too. Like you can go out if you want to chase trophy fish, night fishing would be the way to do it, because again, you need to throw that fish off its game somehow. The other thing that we do in the fall, like right now, and the reason I throw a rig a lot is because some of the giant fish are actually in these schools of fish in the backs of creeks and pockets. But they're not necessarily chasing the threadfin shad that all the other fish are chasing. They're actually back there feeding on bigger yellow bass like barfish or smaller largemouth. I can't tell you how many times I've had a 2-pound white bass, a 2-pound largemouth, a big yellow bass eating off the end of my bait on the way in by an 8-9 pounder.
Right.
And so what I do, I really like to throw a bigger jerk bait and a rig, because it's worked for me so many times where I'm working that bait and I catch a yellow and I'm reeling it in, and like an 8-pounder comes up, eats the yellow. Well, she gets the other hooks from the rig and I catch her. Right. Or the yellow's got the back hook of my jerk bait or my little crankbait, and then the big fish engulfs it, and then I've got that big fish now. So that gives you an opportunity to catch those fish. It's something that you can't mimic that, right? You can't mimic with a artificial lure a fleeing fish or a bunch of fish coming up to blow up on bait. Something to throw that fish, get it into its just natural urges and stuff like that. And then they get really nomadic in the fall too. So they're not actually, the fish that do move, they're not actually sitting still a whole lot on different things. So again, you have the opportunity, and a lot of tournaments are getting won like that right now in the middle of the creek channels. Just chasing individual fish. They're actually chasing loners out there that, 6+ pounders that are out in the middle of nowhere, and they'll get in behind it with live scope and they'll follow that fish for 15 minutes until they get it to bite.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the way a lot of those tournaments are getting won right now. But it's all those things in combination. Like when you're targeting really big fish specifically, I want something to just make it a little bit tougher for them to catch any negative cues that I might have, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, and just, this is my opinion though, I will start catching better quality fish in the fall time. The summertime, I catch a lot of fish in the summer, and on Chickamauga, I mean, we could easily say what the average fish on Chick is, 3.5 to 4.5 pounders would be.
I wish.
Would be. I mean,
that would be an average. like a good fish. You know what I mean?
Right.
I feel like
So-
the average fish for a lot of people is like a 2-pounder. You know, there's a lot of small ones to be caught, and then you occasionally get a giant one.
But during the summer though, I will catch like that 2.5 to 3 pounders. I'd catch a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But even when I'm trying to target the bigger ones in the summer, they're more finicky, and I will start catching more in the fall and especially the early spring once that water temp's starting to warm back up. It's something about where that water temp is cooling and rising up from winter to summer, and then from summer back down to winter. It's
a lot of things. It's a combination of a lot of factors. It has to do with length of day, and then your weather changes themselves cause those fish to have an urgency to feed. When you're coming out of the winter and you're going into the early pre-spawn, those big females, they need to feed, right, to maintain their body weight, because the spawn is going to be very stressful. Same thing when you're going from the summer into the fall. I need to feed. Those first cold days, I need to feed. And in order to do that, a lot of times they make the mistake of getting in with all these other fish and going up shallow. And that's why everyone starts to catch more big fish during that time. In order to catch big fish year round, you have to completely think outside the box, because those fish don't necessarily do what the other fish do in the summer. Those fish don't necessarily do what the other fish do in the winter. And it's great for me, and I've used it as once you figure these things out, you can use it as a way to specifically target big fish. Right. In the wintertime, I can go out and I can hunt specifically big fish. In the summertime, I can hunt specifically big fish because of the places that they get and because they tend to group up together by size. It's a lot more difficult in the later pre-spawn once you start getting out of March, and it's a lot more difficult in the fall when everybody's together. Like today, we pulled into a spot. There were some fish schooling out in 10 foot of water out in the middle of nowhere on a do-nothing flat. And we're throwing in there, and it's like a white bass. And then this guy catches a yellow bass. And then this guy catches a 3-pounder. And then this guy catches a 2-pounder. And then I throw out there and catch another 3-pounder. And then this guy throws and catches a 5-pound channel cat. And then a 10-pound drum. It's everything is together.
Yeah.
And so it's a great time to catch a big fish, but it's a really tough time to just straight target a big fish.
Right.
Where you're around that biomass, which is, to me, it's super fun. It's almost like I don't know how I would describe it. It's a nice change of pace just to go out there and try to generate a ton of bites in order to try to catch a big one, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I do love catching fish, but it's nice to get in that area, and it's like I'm sitting there fishing for fish that I would, and maybe in July, that same school would have been all 2-pounders, not. After I catch 10, I'm like, man, I need to go try to catch a big one now.
Yeah.
All right, cool. But this time of year, I can go back in the creek over there, and I could sit there and catch 2-pounders for an hour and white bass, and I know in the back of my mind, I'm like, any second I could catch an 8-pounder. It's just a really kind of cool, refreshing feeling that way.
Right. Well, and just like what you're saying, because it's all it's almost like a crapshoot of when you're going out there. If you get on that bait when they're schooling up, it really is a crapshoot of what you're going to catch. And
it's still, in the middle of the day, you can still specifically target big fish by, targeting bluegill eaters that are in mats. Instead of getting around any shad mats, you get around bluegill mats. And if you've done your homework, you can find mats that specifically have really big bluegill in them. Okay, that's going to harbor large bass are going to be in those mats. When you see, when a bass is chasing bluegill up on the mat and they're hand size, that's what you want. When you throw in there and you spook bluegill with your frog and they're hand size, you're in the right area.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you're not going to get very many bites at all in those mats a lot of times. Yeah. But if you swing the bat in a mat like that, there's a good chance it's going to be a giant one. Yeah. And, of course, you can get on flats that don't have a whole lot of thread fin but have gizzard shad on them, bigger gizzard shad. And that's a good opportunity to throw like an oversized spook, a big buzz bait, a top toad. You can still get around fish. There's not going to be near the numbers, but it's a great place, especially in the middle of the day if you got a good breeze to go chase them on the flats, or if it's middle of the day, it's already a little tougher. I'm going to go throw that frog just on the off chance that I might get a big one to blow up on it. You know? And then boom, I'll do that. And then as soon as it gets prime time, then I'll go fish for fish that are more schooling on threadfin and then eating, the white bass and the yellow bass that are in there. So then I'll go target those. That's kind of my game plan lately.
Yeah. So when you pull up to a matted grass and stuff like that, and you're talking about you want to have the bluegill in it, how do you know when you're just idling by it that it is a live? Because I've always talked to it or said it as, this grass mat here is alive, this grass mat is dead. You don't hear.
I would get away from that categorization, because a lot of times the mats that have really big bluegill, it's not constant Rice Krispies, right? You're not hearing it all over the top on every little 2 seconds out there. Those are mats that have smaller bluegill in them. They tend to have not 8-pounders in them. You know what I mean? So the mats that have a fewer amount of bait, but it's a really big bait in them, that's what you want. And so a lot of those mats that I've caught really big fish out of, and I know big fish get caught out of, are not what you would consider on a textbook as far as ultra active mats.
Right.
So activity is all relative. Like you can get to a mat that's got shad in it, threadfin shad in it, and there's literally a bass blowing up every 30 seconds in that mat. And it looks amazing. It's super cool, but it is the most irritating thing to fish for. And then if you do catch, you watch 150 fish blow up, you finally get 5 blow-ups, you catch 2, and they're probably going to be 2 or 3 pounders.
Right.
So was it really worth it? Maybe not. But that same mat, say you got on there in a day and there's a storm blowing in, it's overcast, and you throw a buzz frog over top of that and you catch 40 out of it. Again, probably not going to catch a giant one, but it could be fantastic. So you have to think about, okay, this mat, I've located a ton of fish right now. They're really hard to catch. But then in the back of your mind, you remember that. So say a week from now, you go out and there's it's ripping, gas and wind's gassing. You're like, man, it's got to be gassing into that same pocket. It's probably a foot chop back there. And all those shad, the rest of them are blown into that mat right now. It's probably be good. And that's when you go back there and you crack them. So a lot of it just don't get discouraged by going into an area and not necessarily catching what you want. Always put it in the back of your mind. Always be learning and be ready to capitalize it when the time is right.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It's like I found some fish on a flat today, finally, that was cleaning up a little bit. I had about a 7-pounder take a swing at a spook, and I saw some really big ones chasing the gizzard shad. But it wasn't right. Like, it was calm.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, man, it's just not this. Today's not the day. I literally left those fish, even though I knew there was giants right there, and went and did something else. But I guarantee you, here in the next couple of days, there's going to be a time when there's a 10-mile-an-hour wind, kicking through there, and I've got a chop, and I'm going to go back there and crack them in that same spot.
Yeah. So we've had you on here for almost an hour, and we deeply appreciate it, Caleb.
Absolutely.
But we want to give you the opportunity to be able to promote yourself, and which, I mean, you do that just speaking anyways. You do that well enough.
Yeah.
But again, we want people to go hit your social media. We want people to actually come to your website and be able to take you out on guides. If you have a question, the best time to be able to ask him questions and to be able to get the nit and gritty of what's going on or how you need to do things is hopping in the boat with him. And I mean, and I've done it with Caleb. I've done it with Norman. I've gone out on the boat with them, and I tell them when I hop in the boat, you're going to get tired of me asking you questions, and
I never do.
and so because I like to pick people's brains. I like to see with how the conditions are. I like to see how they're thinking, and that's how you grow as an angler. Is how I feel. So we want to give you the opportunity, Caleb, to be able to kind of promote yourself and to be able to hopefully. I mean, usually we have in between 1,100 to 1,400 people watching live, and so hopefully you'll be able to get quite a few trips off of this and be able to grow that YouTube channel and all your social media as well.
Yeah. You can find me on all social media. So I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I'm probably most active now on Facebook. I'm still posting some YouTube videos and stuff like that, but I post a lot of my big fish pictures on Facebook and do a lot of my business on Facebook. So you can find me there. But like you said, the easiest way, if you want to sit here and listen to me nerd out about bass fishing for 8 hours, the best way to do that is but I also, one thing I offer through my website is map studies. It's pretty much the same thing that I do, and I've had a lot of people do this. Got a tournament on a random lake. I'll sit there and I'll basically nerd out for a couple hours looking at satellite images, looking at old maps, new maps of the lake that you fish, get an understanding of what's going on. And then I'll sit here and record just like we're doing now. I'll record like an hour to an hour and a half seminar with you on the lake that you're talking about. I download it and I'll email it to you so you can always reference back. But it's been really helpful to a lot of people on random lakes, and it's something that it's an exercise that I think everyone should learn to do, because if you're doing this right, you're doing your homework right, you should be able to know where you're going to catch the fish you want to catch a month before you go to the lake.
Yeah.
That it happens every year. Ben and I, like Ben, when he comes down from Michigan, he's got waypoints on a lake that we're going to fish down here, and they're going to have fish on. And a lot of them are going to be my waypoints, little turd. When I go up there, I've got waypoints on a lake that we're going to fish, and like I caught my biggest smallmouth ever a couple years ago, and it was on a waypoint that I marked 2 months before the trip.
Right.
It was a 7-pounder, and so like we ended up averaging 27 to 29 pounds for 4 days on one lake. And it was all off waypoints that we had marked way, way, way in advance without ever seeing the lake, period.
Yeah.
So it's a super important exercise to do homework. Not only take what you see visually on the water, remember all that, but actually go back home and do the homework as well, because it'll really help you visualize what's going on that body of water. Right? Like I don't know what it is, but when you see a bird's eye view, basically. Yeah. So then you're like, I caught him here, I caught him here, I caught him here. Well, then, boom, within a few minutes, okay, I've got 20 other spots to hit next time.
Yeah.
And so it just helps out a ton. So I do the map studies. You can do live bait trips. Like a lot of people want to do the live bait trips with me, fishing the big shad and stuff, just because it's wild. You get to see what fish do just actively feeding on their own. Like you're mimicking nature basically, and causing these fish to do crazy things, like in the dead of winter, 28 degrees outside, 4-degree water temperature, and you got 6-8 pounders chasing a gizzard shad trying to eat him on top water. So it's just, you see things that you would never get to see, and it's just super fun. So
my ass will be in a warm house.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Well,
Dude, I'm a cold weather guy. You can't get me cold.
I'm a Florida boy.
Well, and the thing about it, you talk about, I enjoy going out there, one, being out in the boat with you, but I enjoy doing the live bait fishing with you.
Oh, yeah.
But my favorite thing to do, though, when it gets cold like that, if I'm bass fishing, is doing some cranking. The cranking during the wintertime, to me, is probably one that keeps you warm. But
I love that. I mean, there's a lot of really good bites. That the wintertime, I've always loved cold weather fishing, and some of my favorite bites. The A-rig bite is really good. It's so fun when they're actually on it. When you get a true cold front, and you've got ice on some of the lake, that's when they will try to take an Alabama rig out of your hand. Like it's the most violent bite, other than maybe a nighttime spinnerbait bite.
Yeah.
And then yo-yo in a trap, deeper, mid-depth. That's just that. I mean, again, when it's really cold, these fish don't play around. When they want to take a shot at something, they take a shot. So you'll lift, you'll yo-yo that trap, and it's going to fall, and it's like, boom. Yeah. And they just crack it. It's been an awesome year. I mean, we've had 2 over 13 pounds. I had my biggest ever I caught January 30th this year is 14 fish. That's also the 4th largest fish caught in Tennessee. And then had a kid from Indiana catch a 13 3/4, 13-12. And had 4 more over 12 that we caught. And then 33 double digits total.
Yeah.
So far, we're about to get into, hopefully I can add to that. Last year I had 37, so I'm hoping to beat that this year.
Right.
But I can't tell you how many 8-pounders and 9-pounders. Nah. I mean, it's a lot of 8s and 9s. So a lot of people, they come over here and their personal best is 6-something. So I don't even know how many personal bests we've broken this year, but the other crazy thing
that's hard to keep up.
Probably will never see again is the same day they had that 13 3/4. We had a 5-fish limit for 55-13, and I don't know if I'll ever beat that one because we had 2 over 11. We had a 13 3/4, which always helps any limit, and it was just crazy. Like I don't know. If you come over here and do this cold water live bait thing, I'm telling you, you'll see stuff that you wouldn't even believe. We've had 4 bags over 50 pounds this year in 5. We've had 17 or 18. I guess it's more like it might even be 19 over 40 now.
Wow.
In 5 fish. But 3 of those double digits came on artificial. So it's definitely better chances,
Yeah.
For double
well, the thing, the guys, is like people were talking like Chickamauga is like dying down. The big fish are not here in Chickamauga anymore. And you, Caleb, have proven this year that these big girls are still there.
They're there. I honestly, I would like to have had live scope during the heyday because I think there was more.
Yeah,
there had to be, for people to be catching 100 double digits a year on artificial. Now we're ticking maybe 20 a year on artificial.
Yeah. Because
if I would have been live baiting or had live scope back then, there's no telling what you would actually see down there. So I do think there are fewer of those big fish out there, but there's still a tremendous amount of fish in this lake over 8 pounds. I will tell you though, they are doing things that would blow most people's minds. Like where I catch some of these fish and like what they're doing and some of the stuff that they do is it's wild.
Right.
And I think that's a big factor is that, fish adapt to pressure. We know that, and they just position differently. And the way that they're doing stuff, I mean, it's a little different. A lot of these fish, I feel like that we've caught may have not had a cast made to them in a few years.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe ever.
So, probably so. But with that being said, make sure you go check out Caleb BassQuest or BassQuest Fishing Charters and hit that follow, hit that subscribe button. Let's blow him up. And like we know what y'all typically do with everybody is just blow them up afterwards. I've gotten phone calls from guys afterwards saying, man, my channel's grew over 200 to 300 people since the time that I got off the live with you. So we would love to see that happen with Caleb. I mean, we'd love to see more than that, but we just want to make sure y'all go check him out. And if you want to see some big fish, go check out his Facebook. Go check his YouTube channel. He does have a video to where he has 5 fish. What was it? 5 fish, almost 40.
So I have 2 over there live bait videos where we had over 40.
Yeah.
And I've got a backlog of footage. I've actually got cast to catch on that 14.6.
Man.
I just haven't posted it. I don't know why. It's just one of those things. I like looking at it myself. I'm going to do it eventually, but it's pretty obvious where I caught her from the video, so I'd have to do a little bit of editing. I have to, put the Bahamas in the background. I might
blue screen that sucker.
And throw it on Lake Placid and put that in the background. Yeah, she was right over here. The orange groves on Chickamauga Lake.
Yeah, those mangroves.
Yeah.
So, but guys, go check him out. And Caleb, we can't thank you enough for coming on here. And guys, this is going to be coming out live or not live. It's going to be recorded, but it's going to be coming out on Thanksgiving. Golly, I'm getting tired. Halloween. So we hope that everybody is being safe out there and don't run out in front of cars. And make sure you check that candy, or at least all the adults.
Some UFO stories.
So, but we're going to get off here. We're going to go do some trick-or-treating, and we'll see you here on the next one. And we're going to try to maybe have Caleb on during the spring to summer transition to kind of, because I think we had him on before. The first time was the winter to spring, and then so now we've had kind of the fall to winter, and we'll try to eventually we'll get him all the way around. The calendar be on here.
365.
So, but guys, thank you again, and hope to see you out on the water and live the passion, guys.
Appreciate it, Caleb.
You bet. Y'all have a good one.